What is up, and I welcome each and every one of you back to a brand new Civ 6 Deity Leader review, whatever you want to call it, whatever gets the algorithm going. We're back at it again. Last time we talked about Russia, then Japan, then Germany. Today we are talking about Joao III of Portugal. Portugal's going to be the topic of discussion for today. We're going to go through all their abilities, see what they're good at, see what they're not, their strengths, weaknesses, then put them, each of their victory types at a ranking from F tier to S tier. Portugal is another one of those really strong civs, but not much else really to it at this point. If you do enjoy, as always, leave a like, subscribe, helps my channel out a lot. And without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about
Joao the Conqueror, Joao the Moon Slayer, Joao the Invincible.
And as always, the first thing we're going to be talking about is his leader rundown, the ability rundown. Let's start with his unique ability. And before I start, if anyone out there speaks Portuguese, you'll probably want to cover your ears for this one because there's no way I'm saying any of these names right. Porta do Cerco. All units receive one site and you get one trade route capacity when a civilization is met, while also getting open borders with all city-states. So, essentially what this means is you're going to be getting an insane amount of trade routes, depending on how many civs you have in your game. You could have as little as one extra trade route, or as much as, I guess, 50 extra trade routes if you pick the right map. So, really, Portugal does have the ability to get an insane amount of trade routes, honestly, and combine that with their other unique ability, Casa de India, the Portuguese one. All international trade routes must originate from a coastal city and can only reach cities on the coast or with a harbor. So that already restricts the cities you can trade to, which makes things a lot harder, I guess, especially on a Pangea map or something like that. But a lot of the time you can only trade with cities on the coast, so it is going to be difficult getting to cities that aren't on the coast unless they have a harbor, for example. But they receive an extra 50% bonus towards all yields from that trade route, and trader units have a 50% extra range over waters and can embark as soon as they are unlocked. So essentially what this means is the potential with your trade routes is so much higher than everybody else, but the ability to send out those trade routes, it kind of lowers your floor, but raises your ceiling, if that does make sense. If you're in like a Pangea map or no one has a coastal city, you're not getting anything out of your trade routes. You can just go internal trade routes at that point. But if you have Casa de India and you're playing an archipelago map, for example, and you trade with somebody who has a city on the coast, then you are going to be getting an insane amount of extra yields from that said trade routes. So pretty much you do want to play a sort of watery map, a map where everyone's going to have a coastal city to increase the amount of cities you could trade to. Next up, we got their unique unit, the NAU, the NAU, the NAU, the Portuguese unique melee naval unit that replaces the Caravel. It's almost as useless as a Caravel, which really aren't that strong, honestly, at all. But they start with one free promotion, less maintenance, and has 2 charges to build Vitorias. Now, that's the big one, the Vitorias one. The NAU is essentially like the Canadian Mountie. Absolute garbage, dog crap, poop, but they really have one ability and 2 charges to use that said ability. For Canada, it's the National Park from the Mountie. For Portugal, it's the Feitoria, which gives you 4 gold and 1 production to the Feitoria tile, but it can only be built in another civ's coastal territory, and it's pretty specific, honestly. Like, it has to be built on a coast or lake tile, adjacent to land, and not adjacent to another Feitoria, and it has to be adjacent to any sort of luxury or bonus resource in a territory belonging to other civs or city-states. So that's really specific. It has to be on the coast. Can't be built next to each other. It can't be built away from any sort of resource. You do have to sort of get smart and sort of specifically plan it out, I guess, because you can only get so many Vitorias. But the good news is all trade routes sent from this city to this city from Portugal gain 4 gold and 1 production. Add that in with Casa de India's unique ability, and you are going to be getting 6 gold and almost 2 production extra for your trade routes per Feitoria, which is an insane amount, and that really just puts your trade routes over the top, and you will just be swimming in gold. It would not be hard whatsoever to end up making 10,000 extra gold per turn as Portugal. It is just that good. And the final ability we have is the Navigation School. It's a replacement to a shipyard, I think. Probably? Nah, it's probably something else. But in essence, it's a unique building to Portugal, 25% production towards naval units in the city, 1 science for every 2 coast or lake tiles in the city, and 1 great admiral and 1 great scientist points. It actually replaces the university. So you are going to want to get campuses as Portugal. It's essentially a university that potentially gives you more science depending on the coastal layout of the city, production towards naval units, and an extra great admiral point. It's pretty good. It's obviously not the best unique building in the world, but it is still very, very strong and definitely want to play around it. So these are pretty much Portugal's abilities. Let's go ahead and get started on their strengths. Starting with their strengths, it's obvious that hat and that coat is probably Portugal's biggest strength in the entire game. I do also like the Rob. Okay, we'll get into the real strengths. It's the best archipelago civ in the entire game. If you have like a death match a la Squid Game style, and you have to win one game of Civilization 6, what you're going to do is go for an archipelago map, max up the amount of civs, and play Portugal. They are just that good. Archipelago already sort of limits what other civs can do as anybody other than Portugal, because there's less land to explore, less land to settle, less land to exploit resources. It does not matter for Portugal. You're not going to be exploiting the land as Portugal. You're going to be exploiting those trade routes, and having it in archipelago and the ability to trade with essentially every city, because almost every city is going to be coastal or have a harbor, means you are going to be set as an archipelago civ, while not to mention you're going to be neutering the other civs who really aren't meant for archipelago playstyle. So by far the best archipelago civ in the game. Number 2, they have insane trade routes, and I'm talking about insane trade routes. You will be able to get large amounts of gold, science, culture, production, food, faith, whatever you name it, from each and every single trade route by the time the late game comes around. They really are that good. Next up, we got an amazing unique building. The unique building, the navigation school, gives you a lot of science when placed properly. You're going to want to place your campuses in the best position possible early on in the game, and the extra production towards naval units along with the shipyard will allow you to build out your unique now units as fast as possible and spread the good word of the Feitoria across the entire globe, while also getting great admiral and great scientist points. Next up, Feitorias give you better trade routes. Kind of talked about that already, but pretty much they just, what can I say? They make your trade routes all absolutely unstoppable. Finally, we'll talk about 2 weaknesses, because this is kind of something Portugal struggles in. Number 1, susceptible to pillaging trade routes. So if you're playing a multiplayer game, they're really not as good as single player, because like someone will just declare war on you and just pillage every single trade route you have. Like it's just like, unless you get that golden age policy, or that I think there might be a policy card that does this, you are going to get pillaged the entire time if you're going up against human players, and that also has to do with civs you're at war with and barbarians. So try not to get in a war with Portugal and try to clear out barbarians as fast as possible, or use your ships to defend the trading lanes. Next up, the final bad thing, the weakness we have, is that they suck in landlocked maps. If you're in a Pangea, it's good night, alright? It's game over. GG, well played. You might as well be carving out the umbrella thing in Squid Game. Yes, I did just watch Squid Game yesterday. That's probably why I'm making all these references. But essentially, you're just kind of screwed if it's a landlocked map. And if you don't start on the coast, you are so goddamn boned, because each and every one of your abilities is for trade routes. That's all it is. Casa de India, trade routes. Porta de Circo, trade routes. Victoria, getting better trade routes. Now, to get the Victoria, to get the better trade routes. Navigation school, to get nows faster, to get better Victorias, to get more Victorias, to get better trade routes. You see how everything just sort of revolves around the trade route? So if you're landlocked, if you're in a game where there's not a lot of coastal cities, you can pretty much just kiss that win goodnight, because no one is going to be winning that game unless you just somehow want to play without any sort of unique abilities. So definitely don't play them in a Pangea. But yeah, those pretty much their only 2 weaknesses. Let's go ahead and talk about the best starting locations. Now, the best starting location is the more water, the better. Archipelago with maxed out civilizations, as many as you can put on there. Again, you don't really have to worry about settling too many cities, because all the trade routes you're going to be getting are more than enough. But again, like the archipelago makes it better for you and worse on other civs, because like you can imagine somebody like the Zulu or somebody like Genghis Khan, they're not doing too well in a water-based map. Nor would somebody like Korea or Pachacuti, because there's just going to be too much water for you to sort of make use of their unique abilities. But with Portugal, yeah, trade routes are all you need, baby. Get a couple cities, start pumping out those trade routes, and you will be good. And I do want to add in something else. add in Kumasai into your games. Kumasai is absolutely the best city-state to pair with Portugal. For those of you who don't know, when suzerain with Kumasai, all trade routes to other city-states give you a large amount of culture per turn. So if you're a suzerain with Kumasai, trade routes to city-states in the late game will give you like 30 or 40 culture per city-state. It really is that insane. Add that in with something like Kilwa, Kanazawa, and you are looking good. But that's pretty much the best starting location for Portugal. Let's go ahead and talk about their ideal strategy. Number one, this is just going to be essentially a 5-step process to win games on any difficulty, not clickbait whatsoever. The first thing you're going to do is going to get foreign trade to get the first trade route, and you're going to want to research sailing so you can get some boats, start exploring, get those city-state envoys, and get those other civilizations met, and then begin getting your trade routes out slowly but surely. Eventually, you'll just get a super large amount of trade routes, and then from there, you should be able to just do whatever you want. After that, you want to explore and keep trading while getting your nows and navigation schools. You're going to want to build the navigation schools into the nows because you're going to get more science and because the nows are going to be built a lot faster. After you get the nows, you're obviously going to want to go to enemy civs and place Fetorias near the resources. As many Fetorias as you can. I do recommend planning it out, unless you're like me who really can't be bothered to do that, then just place them wherever. But you place in the Fetorias wherever you can and increase your trade route production tenfold. After that, you are going to want to get Trade Confederation, Triangular Trade, all of those policies that just amplify your trade routes because, again, you're going to be getting an extra 50% bonus towards all yield. So Trade Confederation, you're not getting 1 science and 1 culture. You're getting 1.5 science and 1.5 culture per trade route. And by the late game, if you have like 30 to 40 trade routes, that's a giant amount of science and culture just from those trade routes, which is insane. After that, we're going to hit them with the question mark. I just see this in memes all the time, thought it would be funny here. And then the 5th step is obviously winning. It's not hard to play Portugal in all honesty. You just need to get trade routes. Even if you're not good at placing Fetorias, just build a couple where you're trading towards, and then you should be fine. Again, the ideal strategy for Portugal is just simple. Get your trade routes on an archipelago map, and go ahead and start training and racking in the big bucks. You're essentially going to be the Jeff Bezos of this universe, because you are going to be making so much money, you could literally... I ran out of things to buy. Every single time in a Portugal playthrough, I always run out of things to buy. It is insane. But let's go ahead and talk about the secret, unknown strategies that make Portugal a lot of fun. Now, the secret strategies, there are essentially 2 in this video. The first one is going to be the Kumasai culture rush. So essentially what this is going to be, you're going to want to get Kumasai as close to you as possible, and then only trade with city-states from the beginning of the game after getting suzerainty of Kumasai, obviously. From that, you should be able to get an insane amount of culture per turn. By the time the late game rolls around, you will be number 1 in culture by far, allowing you to either A, win a Diplo victory with all the future civic Diplo favor you're going to get, B, win a culture victory because you're going to be 5 or 6 eras ahead of everybody else on the civic tree, or C, just use the culture and the 5% extra science per city-state bonus in order to amplify your science by 100-fold. It really is that simple. The next secret strategy we have is the 1 city challenge. This is just fun because the best thing to do is Portugal. Get the Yet Not Another Earth map pack mod. Go ahead and pick the largest map possible. Add in the maximum amount of city-state. There will be bugs, trust me, and just play as like a 1 city challenge. Every civ you meet's a free trade route. Start trading with them, and with that, you should be able to win a nice and easy 1 city science challenge. So, yeah, Portugal's super fun while doing that, and, not much else to say. That's pretty much all the secret strategies I have for Portugal. Let me know what you guys have down below in the comments. And last but not least, we have the rankings for each victory type. That is right, the creme de la creme of this video, the piece de resistance, and what other French meanings there are. Whatever, let's just get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is their domination score. I'm going to give them a B. They do, again, C is sort of like no advantage whatsoever, but they do have an advantage because, number 1, they can buy as many units as they can with their trade routes. Number 2, the now is just going to be insane when it comes to that free promotion and Fatoria charges, and you're going to be able to spam them out a lot faster thanks to the navigation school. Add that in with some frigates, and you could do a mid to late game naval domination conquest rush, which is super strong. But yeah, they have a pretty good advantage during domination. I'll give them a B because, again, their unique unit isn't that good. The navigation school lets them build more than usual, but again, it's really just the gold and buying a butt ton of units that's really going to be helpful at the end of the day. Next up, we got science. They're getting a straight up S tier for science. Not only is their university replacement super good on an archipelago map, but also all the trade routes they're getting will allow them to keep up in both culture and science, allowing them to get to that 5% extra science per city-state, while also being able to blitz through the tech tree at lightning speed. It's just that simple. They're an elite science civ. They're going to be getting a giant amount of science from trade routes. Obviously, this is assuming you're playing on an archipelago map, so really not much else to say there. They're just super good at a science victory. Culture, they're going to get an A for a culture victory. They are really good at culture victories, kind of the same as science. You're going to be blitzing through the civic tree. You're going to be able to get wonders first access. Not to mention that you are also going to be able to get stuff like essentially wonders, and then you could build rock bands a lot earlier and a lot quicker. You should be able to do really well when it comes to culture and get all the super futuristic governments before everybody else. Finally, next up, we have religious. Religious, they're going to get a B. The reason they get a B is, again, their trade routes can give them some faith. But that's essentially all they have towards religion. I wouldn't recommend them towards religion. You could also buy the sort of religious buildings like temples and shrines with gold. So again, that does help them out a little bit. But just like domination, they don't really have the best advantage towards religious. So I will keep them at the B ranking. Finally, diplomatic, we're going to give them a C. Again, I mean, if you could sort of figure out a way for them, okay, if I go for the culture rush, I'll be able to get future civic and get a lot more diplo favor that way. Or if I go for a religion using my money to buy temples and shrines, I could, but that's kind of like too much mental gymnastics. When it comes to straight diplo victory, they're just going to get a C. You really don't have too many, you don't have any advantages towards a diplo victory, actually. One of the only victories you can't really buy because by the time late game comes around, AI is not going to be able to trade their diplo favor to you. I guess maybe if you use your things to get science a lot faster, you'd get the Statue of Liberty a lot quicker, or I think it's on the civic tree, actually. But yeah, they really don't have too big of an advantage towards a diplo victory, so I'll keep them as a C, honestly. Not really the best when it comes to a diplo victory, but they don't have any sort of like disadvantages or anything towards that. All in all, I'm going to give them two separate rankings as their overall ranking. They are either S tier in an archipelago map, or they are D tier in a Pangea map, and then in between, it depends on how much water there is in the map. So the reason I have two different rankings is because Portugal plays completely differently. Everything is based around the trade routes, and their trade routes are strong. But the fact that you can only trade with coastal cities from your coastal cities means that really it's just archipelago or bust for them. There's a lot of other water maps that could make use of them, especially if the AI ends up building harbors and stuff like that. But in essence, if you really are playing on a Pangea map or like even a continents map, honestly, they're not that good. So it definitely depends on the map you're playing. But yeah, that is going to be it right now. If you have enjoyed, as always, like, subscribe, leave a comment down below on who you want me to do next for the leader reviews. And yeah, we're going to go back to the Ultimate Civ 6 Deity Challenge tomorrow's stream at about 3 o'clock. So yeah, see you on the next video. Peace. Huge shout out to Cash Christian, Ben Omby, John Blair, Jackson Perez, Adam Mester, Empyreum, Polska Bob, Jeff Yutzler, Kim Cosmos, and a giant shout out over to Overflow of Amenities, Robert, Polaris Gaming, JH, and Mick James.